This is a brief video to provide background information to support discussions and exercises that the board will have during their meeting in December. The material covered in this video are concepts and tools that will directly support the conversations and decisions we'll be making in our meeting. The first thing I'd like to discuss are the different types of strategies that are typically considered in a strategy review type exercise. And I think there are three kinds of strategies. There are strategies that provide long-term, high-level direction or articulation of where an organization should be going and why. There are strategies that are decisions, key decisions affecting the scope and the definition of what the organization works on, things like who, what, where, and when. And then there are approaches, strategies as approaches, how we will achieve our objectives and how we get things done. So in our process that we're doing for this strategy review exercise, underneath direction, I'll be discussing some strategy frameworks, elements, and tools. Under decisions, we'll be looking at some key questions, issues, and decisions. And under approaches, we'll be discussing marketing and operational strategies. When we consider the strategy framework, there's a lot of different types of strategy frameworks available. The one I'm sharing here is one that I designed based on the task at hand and information that I have from other projects and textbooks and other materials. But this is a framework that I think is most appropriate for what the ASC is trying to accomplish and what stage they're at. It works in a top-down fashion, and so I think that strategy for this organization should begin with well-articulated insights that should form the basis of a vision and a mission, and I think that there is very appropriate vision and mission already determined for the ASC. The next thing are a business model and value proposition. I think that both of these things can be better articulated and documented in this organization, and they will form part of our strategy review exercise together. The next level of strategy, I think, is a brand strategy, which I'll speak about later. Another common element of strategy development is segmentation and targeting, which I'll discuss later. When markets and products are specified, a next thing I think that is valuable is customized business models and value propositions, which we'll cover. And then when you have all of that strategic framework completed, then you're prepared to develop or discuss marketing objectives, strategies, and priorities going forward in an execution perspective, and the supporting operational objectives, strategies, and priorities going forward. When you have those mid-level strategies identified, then you're ready to discuss and evaluate tactical plans, schedules, and budgets, and at that same time, discuss metrics, goals, and measurement. So I think this is a framework that it could help the ASC organization manage and consider strategy over the longer term. In this meeting that we're coming up in, I think we only have time to address the most important elements, but I'll leave some information here for future discussions about how they might be worked on. When I look at the agenda for our project together, I think of a series of strategy building blocks for us to get us finishing what we need to finish. I think the first thing that we need is starting at number 1 at the bottom of this ladder is a marketing strategy baseline. This video and the background documents that I provided are meant to provide that, put us all on a common plane in terms of our terms and concepts and understanding of strategy and strategy elements. The next part is key learning, observations, and questions that I've developed as a result of doing this project, conducting a series of interviews, reading a lot of documentation, and also doing some of my own outside research. I've identified that in a very brief key learning and observations document that's being shared separately. It's also at the beginning of each of the background documents. There's a key learning section. With number 1 and number 2 complete, the next step would be to identify what are the most important questions, issues, and decisions that need to be addressed. That is also that will be in our agenda. It's also the basis of the background documents and the survey that will be accompanying this presentation. When we've identified those things, then we need to think of a framework and a conceptual framework for us to answer questions, resolve issues, and make decisions. That's what I'm discussing today in this video. And with all of this stuff done, 5, at the top of the ladder, we're ready to begin discussing marketing and operations, objectives, strategies, and plans. So we're working our way from 1 through 5 over time. These are our key tasks and our key deliverables as we work on this project. One of the areas of frequent discussion in the writings that I read and in the interviews that I conducted was the theory of change for this organization. And I've not been able to find a lot of material on describing a theory of change. I know there are some official documents and there are mentions of it in some strategy documents, but I found as an outsider I was still having trouble being able to simply explain what the theory of change was. So I created this diagram as a tool for myself to try and map what was the theory of change and what were key aspects of it. So my understanding of the theory of change is that standards are set and assessments or audits are performed. Certification is awarded to companies, and then supply and demand of certified product happens in the marketplace. I've read about pathways to certification, which are the second and third row of this diagram. So it seems that improvements that need to be made to meet standards and changes that have to be made to address pre-certification non-conformities are also part of the theory of change, probably part of the mechanism. When I look at the theory of change and I think of key outcomes, it looks like when certification has been awarded, then those that are certified are responsibly producing seafood. That's one key outcome. And then when market demand and supply happens for that responsibly produced seafood, there are impacts on environment, societies, and markets. The top 4 rows, I think, are the theory of change from what I've learned, but I see in the bottom row here some key activities. So there seems to be much that needs to be done, or there's much opportunity in the area of setting and updating standards. Then there are some more executional aspects of producer engagement and expansion, maintaining effective assurance, trade and consumer engagement, and market promotion and expansion, all which lead to questions and decisions that may need to be addressed in the strategy review process. This is another perspective I have on the theory of change, especially as it pertains to some of the topics that have been coming up frequently in interviews and some other things that I'm reading. I think that the theory of change is what I just described on the previous slide, but I also think that it subsumes overlapping issues or questions regarding the definition of responsible agriculture today, strategies for how standards should change and expand over time, and impact measurement. I think that the 4 ideas that are on this slide are all interconnected and overlapping in terms of concepts and questions and things that need to be done. So each of them is addressed separately in our agenda and in the discussions that we'll have, in the background documents, and in the survey that is being sent out now. I'll be asking questions specifically around your opinions and your inputs around each of these topics to serve as building blocks in our exercise. One of the other important topics that has come up is a value proposition, and what is a value proposition, and what is ASC's value proposition, and what makes up a value proposition. So Two of the articles that I sent out in the prep work were, I thought, two good articles to start the discussion and the understanding of a technical description and definition of a value proposition. But as I read those articles myself, and I look at other material outside of this project to facilitate a discussion around value proposition, I see that value propositions have four parts. I think in the middle of this diagram are the kind of the most important working parts of a value proposition. So that is, in performing or offering what it does, what benefits does an organization provide to its customer or client group? That is core to what a value proposition is. In addition to benefits, what does an organization do differently or better or cheaper than rivals, competitors, or alternatives? That's an important part of a value proposition too, especially as it influences decisions that might be made by ultimate consumers or corporate buyers. Consumers and other business people make decisions, they choose things if they have a reason why to choose them. And I think that benefits and points of difference roll up to a derived value or differential value. And that is a very high level, quick takeaway that someone uses in a decision process. So derived value, benefits, and points of difference are compared by decision makers against the cost structure that they face. So I call that a client cost structure here. So that could be a shopper, or it could be a retail buyer. They know that they have to pay something for what they're getting, and they compare what they're paying against the derived value that they're getting and the components that contribute to that. So that's kind of a working framework for us in terms of a value proposition. This is what we will be working through in our exercise together. When we look at the framework that I just showed and we talk about benefits, there are some well-established methodologies and tools for thinking about, articulating, and documenting the benefits. And one of them is a benefit structure analysis. It's sometimes called in the advertising business a benefits ladder. And if you talk to somebody who's in psychology or consumer behavior, they would call it a means and value chain. They all are based on the same concept that attributes provide benefits which connect to consumers or decision makers on some higher level, which makes the benefits matter. I think a key idea behind this is that consumers or buyers, they don't buy attributes, they buy benefits. And they buy benefits because they mean something to them. And that's what this chart is meant to depict here. This is a benefit structure analysis or benefits ladder. At the bottom are the ASC certification standards, practices, and actual certifications. Those are the attributes of your offering. Those attributes provide something that's interesting in the value proposition business called shared benefits. So I'm calling those shared impacts here. So when the ASC theory of change is in operation, there are environmental, social, and industry impacts that are shared across the industry that are beneficial. They're not unique to any one person. When the environment, when water condition is improved in a region of the world, everyone around the world may benefit from that. The next level, the third row up from the bottom, starts to be more specific to consumers or business people. The attributes and the shared impacts, they translate for a customer first into functional benefits. Those are things that buying and consuming the product does for a shopper. It may taste better, it may be easier to handle, it may be safer, it may be cheaper. They're rational, kind of logical things that provide functional benefits for them, and they provide part of the reason why someone would buy the product. But functional benefits lead to something that's more important, and those are higher level benefits. Those are emotional benefits, psychological, self-expressive benefits, and values-oriented benefits, where buying and consuming a product not only does something for me and makes me feel a certain way, it fits into my life in a certain way, it reinforces or supports one of my personal values, or it makes society or the environment a better place. So we're working our way up a ladder that is the basis of a consumer's decision. If we look to the right side of this diagram, these shared impacts translate a little bit differently for business people. The functional benefit for business people are business impacts, direct business impacts. Simply put, sales and profit. Their first evaluation of any offering to them is, how does this directly impact my sales and profits? So we need to think that way when we think of what are the benefits of ASC certification to a retailer or a distributor. The higher level benefit for a business person is often called strategic intent. So in addition to sales and profit, thinking at a higher level, a long-term level, or a more strategic level, companies do things because they accomplish other higher level things. So I call that strategic intent. It could be it improves their level of competitiveness. It could be it provides them with sustainable long-term differentiation. It could execute against some of their consumer corporate social responsibility goals. It could make them a better corporate citizen. Those are the higher level goals. So when we think about what ASC does and what the impacts are from that, we have to think about what are functional and business impacts, and then what are emotional and strategic impacts for the people that we're trying to influence to participate in or pay for or choose ASC certified product. We're going to spend a lot of time on this in our meeting. It's also the basis of a series of questions within the survey that you're being sent. This is a diagram of an actual benefits ladder that I use when I'm teaching this to graduate students in marketing. And it's not in this case specific to the ASC. It's for any company. It could be a Ford car, a Volkswagen, it could be Nike shoes, or an Apple computer. This is how people think about products. So I won't read this slide to you. All the information that I've just described there is there. But the main takeaway is that we need to work our way from the bottom, attributes, all the way up to the top, the reason why someone would buy something. And I can't emphasize enough that it is the top of the ladder that has the greatest influence on decision makers versus the bottom of the ladder. And an interesting observation in working with many brand managers and marketing executives and salespeople is that business people tend to focus on the bottom of the ladder, but the people they're trying to influence focus on the top of the ladder. So this becomes an excellent tool for helping business people move or ladder their way up to the top and be able to think and speak and present what they do and why they do it in a way that will be more compelling to their target audiences. This is an example of a benefits ladder that was created by Starbucks. It was created by an American consulting group to help Starbucks coffee shops work through the exact kind of thinking that we're describing here, trying to understand how do the things that they do as attributes translate into functional benefits for their customers, that translate into emotional benefits, that link into their customers' lifestyles and values in a meaningful way. We should be able, when we're done, to draw a diagram like this for the ASC, for consumers, and for trade members. Not only do we have to understand a benefit structure, we have to be able to look at that structure when we've populated it with ideas and be able to identify within it what are points of difference. So we could call that a points of difference analysis. So not only do we have to provide meaningful benefits at two levels to our targeted customers and trade partners, we have to be able to articulate to them which ones we do differently, or better, or cheaper, or easier. So not only do we have to provide benefits, we have to provide benefits in a way that is different from the alternatives to us, which could be alternative programs or competitive programs. This is important because this is part of the decision rubric of somebody. Often for a consumer, it's unconscious, it's a heuristic, but in a trade situation, they are in fact looking for points of difference. And if we can't articulate them, they won't derive them for themselves. We have to be able to articulate them ourselves, and it's very effective when it can be done in the context or framework of a benefit structural analysis. So this is also part of our discussion and part of our survey. Another layer of complication or variation in the value proposition is that the most effective value propositions are customized for key client or targeted segments of customers, channels, or markets. So it's very likely that before the ASC value proposition would be presented to someone or actually used directly, a customized version of it may have to be created for different key markets, as you can see on the left side of this diagram, or we would have to have a variation of that value proposition for consumers versus retail trade versus producers, because they value different benefits differently. And then even within trade, for example, we may need to customize value propositions for key major retailers or customers out there. So I put Kroger in here as an example. So after we've been able to develop and think through a general value proposition, a next step is to be able to customize it appropriately. The next step in the next deliverable or the next task in our exercise is when we have worked through our theory of change and its components, and we've been able to advance the idea of our value proposition. We have to think, I think there's a benefit to more formally thinking through, articulating, and documenting the business model. So this slide shows a business model framework that corresponds directly with the value, the background document on business model framework. So the first part is we have to be able to define exactly what business we're in. So we have to specify what the ASC offers to whom, when, where, and how. That could be in the form of product, target customer segments, markets, and channels. So that is product and market specification, which is one of our tasks. The next parts of a business model, and this is based on 2 articles that I included in our pre-reading. This draws from them. I put this model together based on different things I saw in those articles and some things I saw outside of those materials. After you have an effective scope defined, the next parts of a business model are value proposition and differentiation. We just discussed those. Differentiation are the points of difference. When you have those things identified, then we have to think about the economics of the business model, and that is most importantly revenue streams. So how does the organization capture proceeds from the delivery of what it offers? So there are ASC revenue streams and ASC cost structures. So not only what proceeds can we gather as we deliver our what we sell, but what does it cost us to do that? The next level are important organizational dimensions. What are key resources and capabilities that the ASC relies on to provide value, collects proceeds, and manage costs? And what key partnerships and relationships are there that are necessary to provide the value and collect the proceeds? The last part, with all of those things identified, is key activities. So critical high-level activities necessary for the organization to provide value in the way it does, collect proceeds, and manages costs. So this is a worksheet that's in the business model background document. That in that worksheet I ask you to identify your ideas on what the current business model is in one column, and then in the next column I ask you to identify how you think it should or could change, and that's also in the survey. You can translate your ideas from the worksheet to the survey when you're completing the survey. The value proposition background document also has a worksheet that asks you a series of questions to help us build the value proposition in our meeting, and the questions in the worksheet correspond directly with the survey that you'll be completing as well. I've mentioned the The importance of identifying scope in the business model, specifying what the ASC offers to whom, when, where, and how that can pertain to consumers, products, markets, channels, or producers. This is supported by the marketing strategy concept of segmentation and targeting. And I think that there's an opportunity for the ASC to do some more formal, structured segmentation and targeting to support the specification of products and markets going forward as an important part of your strategy. So the diagram I have here is that if we look at a consumer population or a category of products or geographic markets, we should be able to look at them as a whole, but we should also be able to divide them up into meaningful parts, and that's what segmentation is. And when we've done a segmentation, we should be able to identify the segments within the segmentation that are the highest opportunity or the highest potential, or the most strategic or the most important segments that we should be focusing on, and we should be prioritizing over and above other segments. So I think this is an important concept from a strategy perspective. It's the concept of focus. It's not focusing on everything, it's being able to identify where you will and will not focus. So drawing the chart is segmentation, putting the blue circle around the top two left-hand segments is targeting. And you can do this segmentation and targeting for consumers, for products, for markets, for channels, and for producers. And I think this is a necessary input into the overall exercise that we're performing. As a quick example, I'm showing you a population of consumers. It could be in any market, but let's say these are seafood consumers in the North American marketplace. I've just added to that image a segmentation where I've used income and age to divide consumers into different segments. And in those segments, it's clear that they would shop and consume and behave differently depending on their different ages and their incomes. In terms of targeting, I've just put a green circle around the top center segment. So figuratively, I'm deciding here that of all the 9 segments that exist in the marketplace, I'm going to focus on that top segment that is middle-aged and high income. And I'm going to prioritize that segment above and beyond all other segments. I'm going to design my products and my messaging and my merchandising, everything I do, to meet their needs better than any of my competitors do. And I'm going to put lower priority on other segments. One way to think of this is I might call these consumers inside the green box my primary target customer, and 1 or 2 other segments as secondary customers. But clearly, my strategy can't focus on the 9 segments. I think the product life cycle is something that's important to keep in mind as we think about the strategies that the ASC is following now and into the future. I think that everyone is familiar with this curve, but it shows how sales change over time when a product comes to market. And it shows overlaid on this a population of consumers that are driving the shape of the sales curve. And you can see innovators, early adopters, early majority. It represents the readiness of consumer populations and retail trade to adopt new products, concepts, and programs like, say, a seafood farming certification program. I think that this varies by market, so this is where this becomes useful. In one market, like in Northern Europe, the ASC is probably much further along this curve than they are in newer markets like United States and, say, China. Depending on where you are on the curve, your marketing strategies, your marketing actions, investments, operational strategies are different. They mature from building basic awareness and comprehension of what you're offering to developing interest and intention in participating or buying, to then promoting and reinforcing use and consumption. So I think it's important to keep this idea in the back of our mind as we consider different product or species categories and different markets and different channels and different consumers as we develop our strategies. This is a basic decision tree or hierarchical framework, and it's thinking that is behind my recommendation that the ASC be more deliberate about articulating mid-level strategies to achieve their objectives. As I read the strategic plans and the background plans and the log frames, I see objectives and I see tactics, but as a marketing strategy expert, I don't think I'm seeing articulation of strategies that are the how we achieve the objectives. And if you remember our very first slide in this video, there were 3 types of strategies. This is the third one. This is how do we achieve our objectives. It's an intermediate level of thinking and direction between objectives and tactics. It guides tactical development and decision making, and it also serves as a criteria for prioritizing and deciding what tactics are more effective than others. So we'll be spending some time when we work together discussing what are communication strategies, what are the commercial strategies, what are the operational strategies that move us towards our goals. These strategies are usually in place for multiple years until they're fully executed, and then they can change over time, and they're what annual tactics and budgets are put up against. We'll talk about this more in our meeting. One of the topics in the strategic framework that I call the strategic element that is necessary for long-term go-to-market strategy for the council is the idea of brand strategy. And I think that that will be very useful for what you're doing, because the ASC is basically selling an idea. They're selling a concept to a marketplace made up of consumers and other companies and intermediaries. And I think that branding is as important for consumers as it is for institutional and corporate buyers. So I have a collection of brand identifiers on the screen here. I put the ASC, the MSC, and the WWF up here because you guys think about these all day long and they mean something to you. But I put BMW and the Body Shop up here as well because they have very strong branding. In fact, they have stronger branding. And I think that there's a great opportunity to think about the ASC and its logo the way that BMW and Body Shop think about their logos and their brands. So I'm going to drop 3 slides into this video, just giving you a sense of what does brand strategy mean. So on this slide, this is a definition of a brand strategy, a definition of a brand. A brand is a well-known identifying name, symbol, and slogan and design that indicates something. It indicates that a product has been made or endorsed by a particular producer or method, has been made to standards and quality the producer is known for, will provide an expected experience and set of benefits, and is associated with a set of distinguishing characteristics, beliefs, or values. Something you should recognize here is a progression from concrete to abstract, a progression from attributes to benefits to higher level derived value. This aligns very much with the benefit ladder or the benefit structure analysis that we discussed earlier. Strong brands are defined around that kind of ladder. When you read brand materials and brand strategy, they describe a brand as layers of meaning and value that are added to a basic product. So the basic product is the smallest circle in this diagram, and you can see layers of value and meaning that are added to that product, which are the brand. So we've talked about standards and quality, experience and benefits, and distinguishing characteristics. In the language of branding, that is an extended product, brand utility, and brand identity. Those are the terms that are used by branding experts when they're describing what a brand adds to a basic product. When we talk about brand strategy, there are actually tools, well-defined tools that can help a marketing team or a management team think about, identify, articulate what their brand strategy is. And you could see a progression here from left to right, from product to brand, from basic and rational to more emotional and conceptual, just like the benefits ladder. So these columns of this diagram, think of them as rings that are added to the product, layers of meaning and value that make the product more valuable to its customers. So within brand utility, ideas from the benefits ladder, functional emotional benefits, symbolic self-expressive benefits, and brand identity, which is the kind of the new idea here, dimensions of a brand that are based on personality, associations, reputation, heritage, user imagery, all things that bring richness and meaning to a brand in the hearts and minds of consumers. This is something that would be developed in a more deliberate and extensive branding exercise. So that brings the end of this video. I've covered a series of topics that will form the basis of our strategy review exercise together. They're topics that have deeper background in the background documents that were shared and the articles that were shared, and value proposition and business model, in order to prepare for their meeting, have worksheets that if you completed those, it would have us be much more effective in our meetings. And in the survey that I'm sending you, there are questions that pertain to the things that are described in this video that will collect your opinions and feedback and input on. I'll aggregate and analyze them, and that's what we'll use to begin our discussions during our agenda in our December meeting. Thanks very much for your time and attention working through this video.